Hello everybody, welcome to SmileComics. On this episode, we're going to be learning how to draw Ultron. This Ultron is going to be inspired partially from the comics and from the new Avengers Age of Ultron movie, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright everybody, so we're going to be drawing Ultron from the waist up, and at any point, if I go too fast during this video, remember you can always pause it, and I'll be putting up overlays so you can see the lines I'm laying down. So feel free to pause it when those overlays come up so you can properly draw on your piece of paper what it's going to look like. And so first off, we want to start off with a nice circle, and we want to kind of add these extra lines dividing his head up into certain places. One is going to be the line for the front of his head, and then one is going to be a dividing line for where his ear kind of pincers are supposed to be. With his jaw, you want to make sure it's very slender. You want to make sure you have that angle there that will kind of tighten everything up, because Ultron is going to have very high cheekbones. Okay? And once we kind of have the head and the kind of the pincers on the side of his head laid out, we're going to move on to his torso. Now when it comes to his torso, I like to start off where his arm socket is, so I just draw a circle. And basically you want to think of his chest as being kind of like a cylindrical shape. And so just imagine, where that armhole is, that there's another armhole on the other side that you can't really see. I'll kind of put it in the overlay. And you kind of want to make his waist and kind of his torso a little bit thin, because he's a robot. He's going to be kind of scrawny. So I really want you to take the time to look at this overlay and kind of understand what I did here when drawing his torso there. Now, when it comes to his arms, we're going to be doing a tiny bit of foreshortening. So we're going to be stacking shapes on top of one another when it comes to his arms. So they're basically circles and ovals stacked on top of each other. And we're going to draw another arm in the back that's going to be pointed straight up, and it's going to be the side view of his arm. For right now, we're just going to kind of put blocks and squares in place for their hands in order to just kind of have it as a placeholder, from where the wrists and his forearm kind of meet. There'll be just a square on top and kind of like a long oval type shape where his arms are. But you definitely want to just think of the arms as stacked shapes when drawing this, especially if it's foreshortening. Now here in just a moment, we're going to zoom in a little closer so you can get a better look at the face. So now we're going to start on drawing the more finer details of the face. We're going to start with the eyes. When drawing the eyes, you kind of want to draw kind of a check mark shape, but it's going to hook on one end. So it's going to have this nice kind of crescent shape on the other side. And we're going to draw kind of an underside of the brow, so kind of draw another crescent shape underneath that, and do some kind of like a blocky shape underneath it, or on the right of it. And for the actual eyeball, it's just a simple triangle. And then we're going to do some fancy kind of shapes here that are basically there to give him more of a complex shape of the eyes, because in the actual drawings of him, or in the actual design for the movie, his eye has a lot of metal around it, and it's really complex, and it's kind of based off a real eye. And so we're just kind of doing some fancy little lines there. For his other eye, you're going to draw the same thing mirrored, of course, and it's just going to be foreshortened, so you're just going to draw it kind of squished together, and because it's farther away, so it's going to be shorter and it's going to be smaller. Now, next thing we're going to move on to here is his cheekbones. Now, his cheekbones are going to be exaggerated quite a bit here. I've seen this in a lot of drawings of him, and especially in the movie. His cheekbones stick out way more than his forehead does, so you definitely want to exaggerate these a little bit, and you just kind of want to draw another check mark there, similar to the eyebrows but not as drastic with the curve there. And make it kind of form into a V at the bottom for his upper lip, okay? And you also want to include these tiny edges at the end of his cheekbones there. Now moving on to those kind of headphone pincher things. I'm not sure what they're called, but if you draw these, it's a fairly simple shape. Just remember that the bulk of it is in the center, and it kind of tapers off on each end of these kind of pincher type of things. I'm gonna keep calling them pinchers. So for the next step, we're gonna actually be moving on to the lower jaw. So the jaw is fairly simple. We're basically gonna follow the original guideline we drew out at first. The only thing is, we make sure you put these circle shapes kind of on the left and right side of his face, because if you see any Ultron drawings, he always has like a big kind of gaping mouth. So you want to put a hole there. I did some fancy stuff with it, put some extra lines in it. If you look at any of the reference material for like the movie, you can see that he has those extra lines. We're also going to add in some extra lines to his face, and these are kind of just like, I guess it's to show that he's made out of multiple pieces. So you want to include those lines on the face and on the mouth and jaw, and you kind of just want to make it look as similar to this. Most of the drawings of Ultron include this general type of lines. It usually has the 6 lines on his forehead that go across, and then he has a vent that kind of looks somewhat like a mohawk, but not that tall. So in just a moment here, I'll actually start adding in the vent here. And for the vent, just kind of picture, if you guys are familiar with the Avatar series, the animated series with the airbender and things like that, kind of picture it as that arrow, but not as exaggerated. But you see here, I'm doing the vent, and I don't have any lines to actually put the vent holes in yet. I'll actually add those in later when I'm inking. For some reason I just didn't draw them in. But yeah, as you can see, there's if you count them, there's 3 lines on the top left of the forehead and 3 lines on the right, if you think of it that way. So it's a total of 6. And then there's that kind of circular pattern on the side of the head. The next thing I work on here is actually the chest piece. His chest piece, for this, I kind of made it look a little bit like the movie version and kind of kept it like the comic version. The version here, it's kind of shaped like a V. I try to keep the V theme going throughout this chest piece, and I have a lot of lines kind of contouring and flowing with the V-shaped armor there. And there's also going to be a center bulge there that's going to come out. So you'll see me now drawing this bulge that's going to come out through the center of his chest, and just line that up with his the center of his chest. If you saw earlier, there was kind of a line hinting on where that would be, but basically, one side, since it's closer to you, closer to the camera, then that side's going to be bigger on that side of his pec than the other. So you want to foreshorten it a tiny bit and put it at an angle. But this whole thing is kind of V-shaped. You'll see I'll draw some edges in those that like the same as the ones we have on his cheek. So make sure you put some of those in, and that just kind of adds a cool little layered effect, like this is a multiple, like, complex shape, but it's really not. If you really break this thing down, it's the thing that makes it look complicated is those extra lines that are kind of contouring to his armor and everything like that. And you see now I'm adding in these right angle pieces that are contouring with the chest piece, and then I'll add in an extra line to give it a little bit more complexity. But that's, think of it, as a right angle set of lines, and then another line intersecting it. And see, I'm doing kind of these collarbone pieces that are kind of like an M shape. I think these look really cool. I saw them in most of his designs, and they look great. So just make sure you draw something resembling that for kind of a cool look. As for his neck, his actual veins, I kind of drew like a I guess a jugular vein type thing. and I wanted them to make them look like they were a hydraulic hose or something like that. And you'll see me kind of repeat this pattern throughout his like circuitry on the inside. Like underneath the armor, I'll need to fill in space. So I'll either draw pistons or some kind of hydraulic cord that'll look like that cord running down from his jawline to his chest. You'll see me draw stuff like that. You'll see me draw some pistons. You'll see me draw that neck texture where it's just the plates with the grooves in the middle. And you'll see me kind of work that in underneath basically all the pieces where there's not armor, all the places that there's not armor. Okay, and here I'm just gonna finish up rounding out the back of his chest, and I'll add a couple of separate armor plates because we want to make it kind of give it the illusion of it being complex, being several pieces kind of put together that form Ultron, and just kind of give it a cool look. But feel free to add in or make it as complex or simple as you'd like. A lot of his older designs kind of have the just the bands kind of designs around his armor. They're just lines going across. Here I'm working on his arm. I'll draw kind of like a shoulder pad, and I want to keep it looking a little bit sleek but kind of blocky at the same time. And wherever the armor is not covering up, you'll see me draw in some pistons and some robotic nonsense that it's just there to take up room in all that negative space there, instead of just making it black or just like making it look like there's skin under there. You want to make it look like this guy is a robot. So here I'm going to draw his bicep, and this part here I wanted it to look very blocky, like it's just a blocky bicep. So you'll see me add in kind of these hard lines, kind of defining this thing to be an inserted after fact plate of armor. And then underneath, once again, after I do the back of his arm here, I'll start adding in a couple of pistons and things like that. And then his forearm actually is kind of a neat thing, because when it goes down to his elbow, he'll actually have an elbow pad, and he will also have kind of like these pivoting joints, and you'll see him in just a moment once I get these pistons and things like that drawn in. You'll see him that it's kind of a circular wheel almost, and it's to pivot his elbow. So you'll see those on each side of his elbow as well. So if you're wondering what those kind of pizza slice looking things are, there is his joints there. And I really like the look of this design, so I decided to implement them in mine. And his arm is kind of his forearm there. I'll make it look a little complicated. There's a complicated shape that you'll see in the center that's gonna have some exposed circuitry and pistons and things like that, and I'll kind of reuse the same things that you'll see throughout this picture in that little slot that'll be in front. I tried to make it look like there was a few bands and few kind of metal platings that are kind of sleek but placed there into his arm that formed that shape. I wanted to make it look like it was several pieces forming one shape. So when you're putting this together, the armor and things like that, when drawing robots and things, I try to think of it as kind of designing your own puzzle of armor. And the more complex, more goofy it looks, I figure it looks a lot better. Here I'm drawing some of the bands kind of to simulate a wrist, so like his wrist could pivot or something like that. And I'll draw in his hand, and for this I tried to make it a little bit I made it a little too small. Actually, I made his hand a little too small. I should have made it a little bit bigger, but you should be able to fix that in yours. But you guys get the idea. And I'll draw his knuckles in, and I wanted him to look like a very big knuckles, something that could really hit you really hard. And his fingers, they're kind of scribbled in there a little bit right now, but later on when I ink it, you'll actually see that I just drew a regular finger being bent, and there's actually little circular pivot joints, kind of like his elbow, in between every joint of his finger. So here I am moving on to his next set here. I think I'm actually going to move on to his body here. Now, once again, I'm doing the same thing where I'm doing the puzzle piece armor set again. And when doing something like this, I once again do the bands that are kind of like the grooves. But like I kind of draw a six-pack, but not really. Like I wanted it to make it look like the armor plating is his six-pack, and there was kind of armor plating on his sides that kind of gave him a cool and unique shape. But just when you're doing something like this, think of it as you're making these weird, unique shapes that are forming a puzzle piece to resemble what you know to be a six-pack. So it's kind of giving you an illusion that he has muscle there, but he really doesn't. He's just a robot, so he doesn't really need muscle because he's, you know, running off of pistons and things like that. And it's kind of just a space filler in order to create the illusion of him being strong and muscular, kind of a villain. But yeah, so from here I'll just kind of finish up the torso. I'll draw in these little bands and grooves and things like that. And if something like this is too complex for you, you can always just draw the bands, or, you know, draw the lines down the side and move on. We'll finish up the arm here, once again drawing the bulky bicep, and then we'll move on to his kind of pivoting joint there. But yeah, you definitely want to just kind of keep it, think of it as, you know, draw the simple shape first, his outline of his arm, and then add in some funky lines, and chances are that you're gonna make it look like a complicated piece when it's really not. So you're just gonna kind of create the illusion of a robot. So in just a moment here, we're gonna move on to his hand. Now his left hand on our right, this hand, when I drew it, I was thinking of it being a box shape. When I draw fists, especially robot fists, but if I'm drawing a more organic fist, I try not to make it so blocky. But when I'm doing this kind of a robot type fist where it can be blocky, I really thought of this thing as a three-dimensional kind of cube that's elongated a little bit, almost like a three-dimensional rectangle. And so you can see where I did the lines for the joints that's away from his knuckles. You can kind of see like a cube shape there. But I'll just kind of, you know, draw his hands and his fingers and his thumbs, and then I'll draw that kind of the meaty part underneath your thumb there, underneath the thumb, to kind of create this upright fist that's he's holding up. So now we got basically all of it done. We have exactly where we want to lay down our ink. So in just a moment, I'm going to pull out my trusty Sharpie and some Sakura Micron pens, and I'm going to start laying down some ink. So here I am, and basically whenever I'm inking anything, if my thought process is if it overlaps another piece of his body, like if he's like his arms, for example, that arm is sticking out and it's in front of his face, and it would actually be like that forearm's in front of his bicep and the bicep is in front of his shoulder. So if it overlaps something, I try to make the part where it overlaps have a thicker line and have a heavier like line weight, to kind of create the perception that it's in front of it and it has it's closer to you. So you'll see me do that with the forearms or the actual arm, the right side of his chest, and things like that. And usually on the curved edges, on the curved lines, I try to make those a heavier line as well. And anything on the inside of the outline, I try to keep it a uniform size or a little bit smaller. I'll taper some things off. So I use basically a Sharpie for the outside lines. For the thinner parts where it's not so curved, I use the 0.8 millimeter Sakura Micron pen, and I use the 0.8 as well for the lines on the inside, like the detailing of the face. So in just a moment here, we're going to wrap this up, and I am going to show you guys the finished piece. and you guys will be able to see it a little bit more clear without the jumping around jitteriness of me inking it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and you guys learned something. And if you guys have any other requests for any future videos, please leave them below and I will try my best to fulfill them. Alright, so before you go, I'd like to leave you guys with a couple of links to my past videos. On the left you will find my How to Draw Batman video. I redid it, and so that's going to be on the left, so if you guys are interested in that, you guys can watch that. And on the right, if you guys are in the mood for something funny, feel free to check out my gaming channel, OnlyStrongMen, and I'll leave you a link to one of our funniest playthroughs yet, and it's of Pokemon. So if you guys are into that, feel free to check that out, and I will see you guys on the next episode.